Hello dear viewers, I'm George from Ireland. Here I am on Moore Street in Dublin, and it's this approximate place where the Irish volunteers surrendered on the 30th of April 1916 after their total defeat in the Easter Rising. And here are some of the guys who took part. Joseph Mary Plunkett, this one, James Connolly, and it goes on to list the others. Pierce is there. You see him in profile because he had a squint in one eye, so he's always shown like that. There he was, age 36. I remember first reading about it when I was about 11. Of course, 36 seemed very old to me at the time. And then there's Tom Clark, who spent 15 years in prison for setting off bombs. Very lucky not to be executed for that, and said if he was let out, he would do it all over again. So unfortunately, none of the buildings here are original. But the street is, look at the cobblestone, that would have been there. So it's 16 Moore Street that they decided then to surrender because the gunboat Helga was bombarding their position. The General Post Office, a high building, that's good in a sense because it gives them, you know, the vantage point. They can see far away, they can enfilade the enemy. On the other hand, it's a very prominent target and can be shelled from the river or even the sea. Now, James Connolly was imbecilic enough to say a capitalist army will never shell capitalist property. Capitalist armies had always shelled capitalist property. The First World War was going on. There are examples of that. We say, oh yeah, but only of an enemy country. Well, the United Kingdom was not an enemy country. We were in the UK. Or let's say France, when it was occupied by Germans, then the French army would bombard those buildings in France which were held by the Germans. Just like, well, here in Ireland, when some of our land was held by the pro-German people, the Irish volunteers, yeah, of course, our army, the British army, was going to bombard it. So that was dead wrong. But anyway, the Irish volunteers, they gave a fairly good account of themselves. And they were heavily outnumbered by the end of the 6 days. But did they make a big mistake in dividing their forces across the river? Because then they had no means to go back and forth. The enemy controlled the bridges. I mean, even before the enemy really controlled the bridges, to run back and forth, you'd be taking your life in your hands. Should they have just said we're going to be north of the river or south of the river and actually use the river as a barrier? And there were some very wide streets leading onto the GP, towards the GPO. Maybe that was good because you could see the enemy easily coming and shoot them. On the other hand, on narrow lanes, if the enemy has to come into a very narrow street to approach you, they're more easily shot that way. I'm no military expert, probably shows. Never been a soldier for even one day. There you can see the Easter lily symbol because it was Easter, the springtime of the year when lilies come out. So Republicans in Ireland, that's been people who support that ultra-nationalist cause, the Sinn Féin party in particular. They often wear Easter lilies in their lapel in the run-up to Easter. Just like British people often wear poppies in the run-up to Remembrance Sunday in November, which commemorates the end of the First World War and British service people who died in all the subsequent conflicts. And at this approximate spot, that's where the O'Rahilly was killed. Alfred O'Rahilly, known as the O'Rahilly, as he was a clan chief. And there you see something from a letter he wrote. He was wounded, he was bleeding, he knew to death, so he scribbled a note. So, he was a Kerryman who was in the Irish Volunteers. He'd heard that the insurrection was aborted, so he'd driven around Dublin city and county giving out that order. And then he realised that it actually wasn't aborted, so he said, okay, well, I'll come along and I'll fight in it anyway. So he managed to get himself killed. He's interred at what's it called? Interred at Glasnevin, saying, written something, I was shot, after I was shot. I am something, I can't really get this to it. Short, leading in a charge up Moore Street, took something in a refuge in a doorway, and all the rest of it. So he said, please deliver this to 40 Herbert Road, Dublin, goodbye darling. So it's quite an affecting note, even if you completely disagree with him or think he's evil or something. Yeah, there's a bit of a human grief there. You see the fasces on either side, the fascist symbol, not because it was a fascist, really. Fascism as such hadn't been invented. The bundle of rods in ancient Rome, the quaestors that judges used to hold. And then you'd think there'd be an axe coming out, maybe it's going to be like an Easter lily symbol, the harp of Ireland at the top with the wreath, probably the funereal wreath at the top. So anyway, it was at 16 Moore Street that the Irish Volunteers decided it was time to throw in the towel. And P.H. Pearce, who appointed himself president, said he was doing it to prevent the further bloodshed, well, slaughter of civilians. But he'd started this fight. Might have been better to not start it in the first place, especially as I think it was Connolly said, we're going out to be slaughtered. They knew they were going to lose, so don't do it. They said, oh well, it'll lead to a better deed later on. Or I can't remember. Yeah, I saw this plaque, well, on the gravestone of Nurse O'Farrell, the one who was carrying the white flag, messages back and forth between the army commander and Pierce, and he wouldn't use Pierce's title, as in Pierce's rank, saying just saying Pierce. Anyway, and there's this plaque for the woman who was carrying the messages back and forth to organize the surrender. Said, oh well, it was surrender but not defeat. Well, it definitely was defeat. What else was it? It was a total defeat. You know, and a guerrilla campaign might have been more successful, and that's what the Irish Volunteers tried a few years later, 1919 to 21. And it was here, maybe some of these buildings are original. There you see it says the Easter Rising, a Kashka. Probably can't see it from there. It says it in Irish, Kashka being Easter in Irish. That's where it was. And there's all this symbolism. Oh, well, we did it at Easter because it's about resurrection, that Ireland's coming back to life again, or death leads to life like Jesus Christ rising from the tomb. There is a bit of that, but I'm not sure that's why they held it then. Okay, they were thinking the First World War came along. Is this war going to last? It is going to last. Is the opportune moment to strike? And by the time they organised themselves, kind of late 1915, which is why Patrick Pearse in Christmas 1915 wrote a sort of a poem, Dear Lord, in the coming battle help the Gael. He thought it represented Gaels, and not just Irish people. Gaels as in people who were here in Ireland before, say, about the 7th century AD. We always in lots of waves of Celtic invasion and immigration, and the Danes and so on. So yes, we are partly Gaels. That's an important part of our heritage, but we're by no means all Gaels. I mean, we're usually a melange of various things, but it's ludicrous to try and equate Gael with Irish. And I know the Irish language, Gaeilge, is that, but it's not the original language of Ireland. There were other Celtic languages before the Gaelic language supplanted. So anyway, this is Moore Street, and there are other little lanes here they took refuge behind when they lost the GPO. It was really just a smouldering wreck. And that is the side of the GPO, not the fine front which you usually see. So a lot of the streets around here are named after the nobleman who owned the land. I'm not sure it was Moore, but Henry Street, because he's Henry whoever he was Earl of, I don't even remember where, and that's why there's Earl Street adjacent to here. You can see how multi-ethnic Dublin is today. Okay, so that's probably enough from me. So please, thank you so much for your donation, someone who gave me £10 today. And please, watch my videos, subscribe, tell your friends and neighbours about them, and remember to book online lessons with me in all sorts of subjects in history and politics, religious studies, geography, English, literature, English language, English as a foreign language, law, and I'll help you with dissertations, with essays, theses and so on, elocution, exam practice, educational consultancy. I'm a tour guide in Londinium. All right, I'm going to ring off now, so goodbye everyone.